In this episode, we talk NHL Carousel with coaches from Paul Maurice, Dave Lowry, to Mike Yeo, and Bruce Boudreau. We go deep in this week's Team ISO, discussing what is wrong with the Seattle Kraken's goaltending, what they need to fix there, and how the defense is playing. Stay till the end of this episode for an important update to the podcast. Hit the music. Welcome to Slam Sports Hockey. I'm your host, Peter Boudreau, and the mic is always on. It's your one-stop weekly shop for expert analysis on every single team. We are a fun hockey community, bring everyone together. You can find me on Twitter now at pbojarinov, Bojarinov. V as in Victor, formerly at Russia98. You can find the full show at Jablam Sports. That's Jablam Sports. If you have any questions or comments, please tweet us. Use the hashtag at Jablam Sports. Please subscribe to us if you haven't done so yet, and click on those three dots in your podcasting app. Share our show with 3 hockey fans you know. Thank you, everyone. Remember, check out our website, www.jablamsports.com, for our podcasts and even game notes for each episode. You'll get all the links to everything we mentioned on this show, including guests. We've even got articles this year and much more content weekly. For our podcasts, click on podcasts on our website and then hockey on this show specifically, right on our website. For this week's Trending Now, back on the panel are Jennifer Chefaro. She's a hockey coach, trainer, and she also covers the Penguins. Jen, why do you like covering the Penguins so much?
I mean, I have good taste in hockey, I guess.
I see. And of course, you can also read her Penguin stuff at the Donut Bag. You can find her on Twitter at ShootW Authority, so shoot with authority. Also back on the show again, Mitchell Clinton. He's the Jets TV reporter covering the Coyotes, right? Or is it the new version of the Jets, right?
The new version, 2.0, if you will. So yeah, but it's interesting, right? Like we break out the heritage jerseys and they've got the old logo, and whenever people ask me about things like anything to do with the history of the team, how the logos work and all that kind of stuff, I'm just like, I don't know. There's a legal department for all that. But I do know our fans loved 1.0. They love 2.0. So either way, it works out.
And you can find him on Twitter at Mitchell Clinton, double L for the Mitchell. And so we're going to jump in. I don't want to talk negative stuff. Let's talk about positive stuff. We can talk about COVID. We can talk about shutting down. It's happening. It's going to happen. It might get worse with everything going on as well. The cold weather. Cold weather is hurting. The way COVID works, it's hurting my nerves. But let's go on to some, you know what? Maybe this isn't super positive, but I thought it was pretty cool. Paul Maurice, of course, stepped down and away as head coach of the Jets. But the way he did it is something we've never seen before. It just seems like, did he beat the punch, or was he so progressive or such a great coach that he went and took, basically quote Coach Paul Maurice, "This is a good team. I'm a good coach. But sometimes you can only push so far. Sometimes a team needs a new voice. They haven't quit on me, but they need a different voice. The right time for it, it's the right time for it, and I know that." Mitchell, first off, how does the Jets and the Winnipeg family feel what are you getting about them and how they feel about Maurice and this situation?
I mean, there's a huge amount of respect there, and I think it goes both ways between the players and the coach to the players. I mean, when he said that the team didn't quit on him, I mean, it was pretty obvious that they hadn't. I mean, yeah, you would have liked to have seen a few more wins, but twice this season you played Vancouver on the back half of a back-to-back, and there hasn't been any quit in the group in that. And then I also look at the back-to-back. I think it was at the end of November into the start of December, where they were in Minnesota. I had one of those nights that I think every single team has, where absolutely nothing goes your way, and then you get back on the ice the next night against a Calgary Flames team that at that time was absolutely rolling and was at the top of the Western Conference. And the Jets fall behind early in that one and didn't stop playing and turned that into a win. So clearly the team didn't quit on him, like he said, and there's a lot of evidence to prove that. I know the players were just shocked for the most part. A lot of them didn't see that coming. But at the same time, having the continuity of Dave Lowry coming in as the interim head coach, I think, is helpful. It's not like there's an absolutely brand new face coming in. It's a guy that they've worked with the past year or so, which I think is a lot of help for the players in that regard. The game against Washington, they were able to rally back, but weren't able to pick up the win. I think it was just that was a long and emotional day, even for someone like me who I joined. Started covering the Jets in November of 2013. Paul Maurice was hired in January of 2014. So he's essentially the only coach I've ever known. And I remember when we got information that it was coming, we had a pregame show that we started actually 45 minutes early because of it. We took Paul Maurice's press conference live and everything. Yeah. And I just remember sitting there and one of the first phrases out of my mouth was head coach Paul Maurice. And I realized that's wrong. It's not former head coach. It was just, I was like, that's going to take some getting used to. And I think it was some getting used to for everybody in that room. So I think it was, Paul Maurice has always been somebody that speaks really well. He did that day. And it was good for the Jets, I think, also to pick up a win the other night against St. Louis as well. And what ended up being the final game that they're going to play before the holiday break here. So just a tough day, but as he said, it was a good day for the Winnipeg Jets. I think it took the players and kind of the rest of the organization a couple of days to get over it a little bit, if you will. But they're moving forward here, but still, I think there's some great memories of Paul Maurice and his time in Winnipeg.
Yeah, sure, there has been. I even remember when he was coaching in Toronto. I think the team wasn't great, but you could feel his vibe, the way he deals and coaches with the team, as well deals with the media. He's above and beyond some of the other coaches and the average coach out there. He said, and you even mentioned 2013, he joined the team. He's been there for that long, but he can't take these guys all the way. Jen, I know you were also tweeting about different situations. It might have not have been in terms of Paul himself, but in terms of how coaches and people train and deal with young talent and kids in general. Is it on maybe Paul's side or some that he's kind of letting the team down here at all, or you're not getting that vibe at all?
Of course, it would definitely affect the team. I mean, whether they take it as him letting them down or disrespect or disservice, I can't really say, because if he did all the right things for this team, but he felt like he was at a standstill and he just wasn't getting, the best out of his players, and he felt that another person might be right for that job. Personally, if it were me and I was in his position, I might look at extending or changing my bench. So having different assistant coaches come along that might be able to help me out. That would be my first step. But it takes a big man to admit when he is, his hands are tied. And I've never had any, much thought about Paul Maurice as a coach. I do remember his time back in Toronto as well. But I did gain a new respect for him over doing this, because it could not have been an easy decision, first and foremost. And first third of the season, and with the pandemic and everything going on, I mean, this is something he's obviously been thinking about for some time. And I think that it's the best thing he can do for himself and the team. And we really don't know if he was right or not for, until we get through the choppiness that the league's in right now. But maybe by the end of the season, the Jets will be in a better place. And I mean, as a coach, it's your job to bring the best out of your players. That's the absolute number one job, right? So I'm excited to see what happens for the Jets after this move. And I'm also, curious as to what will happen for Paul himself in his career.
Yeah, we'll find out. I don't know if Paul will be on the sidelines for too long, but let's go to now. I guess, is it interim head coach Dave Lowry? And number one, what kind of coach is Dave Lowry, and what's his resume? We know he used to be a good player. He's got a ringer on the team, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to describe Dave Lowry, and he did it himself, honestly, when he was asked about his coaching styles, he's just very direct. So he's an honest guy. Usually he just kind of says if there's a conversation that needs to be had with the player, he'll have it. Not even necessarily in like the, back in the day, the big, like, tough coaches or whatever that were tough on players or anything. It's just, if something needs to be talked about, whether positive, negative, he'll have that conversation. He's not afraid to do so. He's been a head coach in the Western Hockey League with a few teams, with Calgary Hitmen, Victoria, and then also the Brandon Wheat Kings for 1 year before coming to the Winnipeg Jets. So clearly he's been around. He coached the Canadian World Junior team as well 1 year, but this is his first, NHL head coaching spot. He's been an assistant coach in a couple spots. The one thing he did say, when he was asked about it is, I came here to work with Paul Maurice. And of course he did for last season and for parts of the start of this season. But it was important to Dave to have Paul's blessing on this. And I thought that was interesting to hear. And it just kind of shows, I think, the mutual respect between the two of them. Now, what I'm curious to see is how much of a change there really is in the Jets game, because, Dave was on this coaching staff. Like, sure, there's going to be some changes that might be small, but there's likely, and this is just how the NHL schedule works, there's just not enough time to implement sweeping changes, because you'll get on the ice. And the one thing that you want with your players, and maybe Jennifer can hit on this as a coach, you don't necessarily want your players out on the ice thinking too much. You almost just want them to play the game within, of course, the structure that's been, not necessarily ingrained in them, but what they've practiced repeatedly over and over again, so that you're not out there thinking, because as soon as you start thinking, you slow down. And the Winnipeg Jets, when they're at their best, are fast and they're direct, and their decision-making is very quick. So I think Dave Lowry might just, try to unleash that a little bit more, maybe take some of the decisions out of the game and just kind of make them a little bit more direct. But at the same time, up front, man, you got some creative players up there, and you really want to allow them to do their thing, including third star of the week in the NHL this week, Nikolai Ehlers, who had 4 points against St. Louis, doing what he does best, which is create things on the ice.
Man, Kyle Connor and Nick Ehlers are just so underrated, those two. Oh, my God. They're both unbelievable. I would love to see them 3-on-3 at an All-Star game if it's going to happen. Jen, to you, continuing with what Mitchell said there, and my question also to follow up is, him being like what Mitchell said, being direct, but as well, it's interesting, the possibilities of having a father coaching a son. Does that make life easier or harder on Adam?
I mean, I don't know. I've never been in that position, so I can only really speculate. But I mean, you look at any family ties in hockey. Like, for example, the Sedin brothers played together, right? On the same line, and they were dynamic. So they have this like engraved chemistry. So I mean, it could go either way. It could be good, it could be bad. but I you can't really, it's kind of hard to assume without having something to go off of. I think, and I didn't know, I'm sorry, excuse my ignorance, but I didn't know that the interim Jets coach was already part of the staff. So prior to stepping up, so that actually could change things for what I was said before. He's not going to be having that freshest view because he's coming off of Maurice's system, right? So unless he has like this whole total different structure and he moves on to his own, like how he does things, I don't really think maybe there's going to be much of a change with the Jets for that reason alone. But you never know, because it's like any player being called up from the AHL and they get to play, right? It's their shot. It's their audition. They're trying out. They want to stay permanently on the roster, right? So they give their best. The same thing could happen for is it Dave?
Yeah.
Thank you. It's his first time in the hot seat, so he could really shine, and it's exciting. It's something I've always wanted to do as coach in the NHL, so I'm excited for him and excited to see what happens. Yeah, but as to familiar or family things, I have no experience with that.
All good. So let's go down the list. We've got a lot of head coach that are interns. Blackhawks, Derek King taking over for Carlson. His record is a big difference, right? Carlson was 1-9-2. Derek King, they're above 600. Panthers, Andrew Brunette now taking over for Joel Quenneville, Coach Q. He was perfect, right? 8-0. How do you replace that? But they've still been just over about 550, 11-7-4 for the Panthers. Flyers, Mike Yeo now taking over for Alain Vigneault. At the time, Vigneault had just over 400 percentage, but now it's over 600 under Yeo. Of course, a lot fewer games, and of course, more recently, now not an intern, but that's everybody's lovable coach in Vancouver, Coach Bruce Boudreau, taking for Travis. Travis not doing so great, 8-15-4, but under Bruce, they're perfect. Number one, I don't know if you want to touch base on this, Mitchell, but how much is that on Green? How much is that on a new voice? Or how much is that just being straight up Bruce being Bruce?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell as someone that's not, around the Vancouver Canucks too much. And even from the two games that the Jets played against them, it's not like I saw a wild difference in how they necessarily play the game. Sure, there's some, little structural things that they likely changed just to shore up a couple of things, but both times the Jets played them, it was the Thatcher Demko show. So anytime that as a coach, you have a goaltender that makes the types of saves that he did on even Blake Wheeler in the first period of the game that Wheeler ultimately ends up getting injured, unfortunately. Yeah. Wheeler could have had a hat trick in the opening period. And Demko was able to make a couple of big stops, and that when things are going well for you, that's just what's happening. Yeah. So I'm going to be curious to see, even with all the teams that you mentioned, how things go. Assuming when the NHL season, I'm going to assume gets back to normal at some point. But once the games start to add up, I'm curious to see if there's not necessarily a regression to the mean, because you look at the Vancouver Canucks and that roster and you're like, oh, there's definitely some potential here. I'll be curious to see if they, they're not going to go undefeated the whole way. It just doesn't happen. But, if their win percentage or point percentage starts to come down a little bit back towards where they were, or if, they sustain that and they keep on going. And it's just going to be one of the interesting storylines over the course of the season, because there's, as we all know here, I mean, there's so many things up in the air at this point about how things are going to transpire over the next few months. It's going to be just one of the many challenges that these coaches all have to deal with. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. And of course, as a Western Conference team, of course, you're keeping an eye on how things go in Chicago and in Vancouver as well. That's just how it is over here in the Western Conference. But I'll be curious to see how it all plays out.
And last question, Jen, to you, before we wrap it up for team Trending Now. Out of all the coaches, they change up, and it seems like it always works. It just seems like everything works whenever they change up the coaches. We saw that in Pittsburgh as well, right? So are you really just going to keep on seeing this trend where they change coaches and then most of them end up, winning Coach of the Year? And could any of these teams possibly go all the way?
I'm going to first start by saying Mike Sullivan's been snubbed for winning Coach of the Year year after year after year after year. It doesn't matter what this guy does with this team. We go through injuries. We go through so many problems, but he still manages to rally this team together. As regarding bringing in a new coach and it working out, that's not always been the case. Some coaches don't work out at all. And I could list many and going back over the decades that I've been watching hockey. But the thing that a new blood, new vision, new, even though it's a dinosaur in the league and he's been coaching other teams for years, it's a fresh take and it breathes life, a new form of life into the team, right? So the players get excited, they're like, oh, this is going to be great. They play a little better. We're seeing it with Vancouver, right? I think, aren't they undefeated or something since Boudreau joined them? So, you see stuff like this because sometimes things get stale and it's not working. And but it doesn't always work out. So we'll see. We have to, like Mitchell said, it's kind of too early to determine if things are gonna work out. It's like the honeymoon stage, they're in the honeymoon stage, things are new, things are hot, and they're excited. But if they can continue building momentum, any of these teams that get these new coaches in, if they can learn how to build the momentum and keep building it throughout the season, then anything's possible. So yeah, it's a pretty exciting season for some coaching changes and whatnot, despite all the
Yeah. All right. Well, it's exciting, and I hope a lot of these teams can keep it up. It'll be interesting to see. We'll see what happens with the Jets. I'd love to see Lowry and his son maybe get some more ice time and throw him on the power play more often and see if he can bring up his game. You can find him on Twitter at Mitchell Clinton for Mitchell and for Jen at ShootWAuthority. Next up on Team ISO, we've got Nick Gismondi. Have you ever wanted a one-stop weekly shop for expert analysis on every single NHL team? Look no further than JablamSports.com. We've had guests from James Sapolsky, Ardo Cal, and yes, even Dennis Bernstein shows up monthly. We are a fun hockey community bringing everyone together. Find us wherever you get your podcast and type in JABLAM Sports. That's Jablam Sports. Our website is, yes, you've called it, JablamSports.com. Go download and subscribe right now. You can also find us on socials at Jablam Sports on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'm Peter Bojanov saying, puck you later. All right, for this week's Team ISO, we are isolating on the Seattle Kraken. On the panel are Andy Eide. He covers the Kraken for NHL, the Kraken, of course, and ESP 710. You can find him on also the Sound of Hockey podcast. Get him on Twitter at Andy Eide. That's EIDE. Welcome to the show, Andy.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on. And my pal, Nick, you've been on the show 5 times. I'm going to let you know what you've won in a second.
Here's my punch card.
He is the broadcaster for the Kraken on Root Sports Northwest, as well a reporter for the NHL Network. You can find him on the Twitski at Nick Gismondi. So for the 5th time you've been on the show, tell him what he's won, Jim. Well, actually, you are going to be winning something. It might take a month or two. On JablamSports.com, we will have the merch page up and running soon enough. Will Nick get anything from there? I don't know. I don't have that much money. If you want to give me money, send me money. But people can buy merch. The old Jablam hockey t-shirt will be available. The new logos will be available. We'll also have hats, mugs. I wish I can get more of these. Maybe Nick can send me some. But the mugs and the hats, they're going to be there. Jablam Sports Hockey will be there as well. And you, Jablam Sports Jaguars logo, a hockey jersey team will be available. And for all the people and the great guests that I have on the show that have been on the show for more than 5 times, that's like Nick. Nick's on there. He'll get sent from my team to him a hockey card designed with Nick, and he's going to give me his stats. So his appearances on the show will be on the hockey card, as well as some hockey stats. He'll get the image. You can put it wherever you want, Nick, and the image will be yours, and it's going to be on the website too.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you so much. That's awesome. And I love that you're rocking a Seattle Kraken hat. It's funny. I have a bunch of them. So I bought a ton of them. My motto is always, it's make somebody's life better. So I have a ton of the Kraken 47 brand hats. And if I'm wearing it around, and somebody says something about the team or something along those lines, or maybe you get recognized, I always give them the hat off my head. So I was in Buffalo Wild Wings with my nephew a couple of days ago here I'm in Denver right now.
Yeah.
And waiter came over and was all excited, big Kraken fan and living here in Denver. And I was like, oh, do you have any merch yet? And he's like, no, I've tried, blah, blah, blah. So I gave him the hat. So I have a lot of those hats. I like giving them out. So
you're a beauty.
Spreading the love.
The thing I liked about the original logo is when they unveiled it, the eye was like breathing. I like the 3D-ness of the breathing eye. That I love the anchor logo as the tertiary logo, and I hope they either go with that or kind of redesign it a little bit and have that third jersey. Anybody have any inkling as to when that might be? Maybe a couple of years away?
Yeah, a couple years away. I've heard there's no third jersey this year.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, they're pretty mum about all that stuff, Andy. I've heard they're pretty mum about the mascot too and all that kind of thing.
There was a giant tentacle in the rafters Saturday night that we thought maybe they were going to use for pregame, but it stayed up there the whole time. It's really up high. You have to be up high to see it, but something's coming. Put it that way.
Ooh.
And I'm not breaking any rules here because there were pictures of it on the internet. Like some people didn't notice it, so I'm not breaking any stories here. And I don't know anything more about that other than it was there.
I was going to come into your frame.
It was there. People saw it. We don't know what it is yet.
He's slowly coming out with the tentacles. Hopefully he'll put the Red Wings to shame on the ice with their playoff mantras. All right. So let me ask you the hard-quitting questions. All right. Pop quiz, hot shot. It's one of my favorite movies. Who said you can't out-pizza the Pizza Hut? Andy?
That's Morgan Geeky.
That is right. Kraken. So he loves Pizza Hut, eh?
Well, the story is, and we had him on the Sound of Hockey podcast, and we asked him that same question. He goes, he got a little bit viral last year with Carolina when he said that in a post-game presser. He said, at the end of the day, you can't out-pizza the Hut.
Yeah.
And the story is that they were in the locker room, and Brendan Moore had his pregame motivational speech and ran out of the room, and Geeky turned to the guy sitting next to him and kind of joked and said, that's true what he said, but also remember, at the end of the day, you can't out-pizza the Hut. He didn't think it was too much of it. They all loved it. And so he had media and after their next game, and they dared him to say that. So he threw it out there. It became viral. Pizza Hut gave him a gold card. He has a gold card from Pizza Hut and a bomber jacket. So and then there was a moment here with Seattle where somebody brought that up, and he was pretty funny about it again. So he swears by their barbecue chicken.
Nice. It's this very specific type of pizza.
Yes,
very specific. All right. Before we get into a little bit of Seattle possible playoff team. Everybody wanted to talk about that and everything, what's going on with the blue line. Riddle me this, Howard Stark. That's right. You know why I'm calling you Howard Stark? Why are they second last in goals against? Well, before that, yes, I'm referring to my pal Nick. I finally thought about the other day, and I'm very good with faces and voices. And I was watching the show Agent Carter, and I saw my pal on the show who is Howard Stark. He plays Howard Stark. It's the actor Dominic Cooper. And man, it was like, Dominic Cooper, that's who Nick looks like. He looks like Howard Stark from the Captain America movies and the Duchess and all these other movies I don't even know that he's done. But Howard Stark, that's who you remind me of, Nick.
I'll take that. I'll take it.
All right. So why is the team, we talked about it. Everybody thought this team was playoff potential. We all thought they were like on the verge. They'd be on that team in predictions. You talked about it. We all thought, okay, the Kraken, they're in that division. They have potential. They can make the playoffs. Defensive depth is where we all said, wow, this team is phenomenal. Why are they second last in the league in goals against?
They got good goalies. They need good goaltending.
Mm-hmm.
And it's truthfully for me, that's simple.
It's straight up the goaltending. So when we go to stats and we check out the guy who won he didn't win. He was nominated for the Vezina, Philip Grubauer. He's last in any goalie that's played more than 7 games. So basically any actual backup who plays a lot of games or starting goalies. He's last in a lot of categories, including save percentage. But they locked him up. The one thing that we are all were like, Seattle's not going to lock up any players. They're not going to go for big fish. The Kraken went for the big fish. They hooked, lined, and sinker Grubauer, gave him the big contract, and he's not the man right now. What are they going to do with that contract? Andy, what do you think? What can they do anything to Grubauer's game to change him around?
I think one of the best things that can happen is the emergence the last 4 games or so of Chris Driedger, the backup.
Mm-hmm.
Up until Saturday, he'd won 3 starts. I thought he played great Saturday. He gave up 4 goals, but he made 36 saves, and Edmonton was all over him. And one of those goals is Mark Giordano knocked the guy into him, and then the puck into the net, and that goal counted. That was the game-winning goal. So I think a good Chris Driedger, and he's been having some injury problems. I think that'll help Grubauer, not only give him some days off because Hacksaw will trust him more, but I think it creates some competition. Up until now, Grubauer really hasn't any competition. He has not made the key saves, the big saves. Hasn't all been his fault, but at the end of the day, he has to come up with a save, and he's just not doing that for them.
Yeah, and I'm with Andy on that. I think Driedger is really shown some promise. And Andy, I know you and me sort of kind of talked about it, hanging out at the rink and everything like that, but I feel like the team plays a little bit differently in front of Driedger. I feel like there's more jump to their step. I feel like they play a little bit more looser. I feel like they're getting more offense from their defense, which is what Coach Hacksaw wants them to play. He wants that defense first mentality. But if you do play good defense, it's going to throw you into the offensive opportunities and good transitions through neutral ice. And I feel like when Driedger's in net, that's what we're seeing from these guys. I feel like they play a little bit more confidently. I don't know, Andy, I've sort of kind of said that on the broadcast a little bit too. And I think the way that Driedger has played is a little bit more of maybe what they're looking for to spark the offense.
Yeah, and it could just be that they relax mentally because Grubauer has struggled, that maybe they don't have as much trust, and maybe they would never say that, but maybe in the back of their minds, I don't know if they trust him as much after the way the start has gone, and they trust Driedger a little bit more right now. And but the beginning of the season, we all thought it wasn't going to be Grubauer getting 80% of the starts. We thought they would be more of a tandem, 1A and 1, and then Driedger just got hurt, so he didn't have that. So they had to lean on Grubauer a lot early in the season, and there were some good games. Not like he's been terrible every single night, but there have been nights where he really has struggled, and he's let up a lot of goals that you just shake your head on and think, man, he probably should have had that one. There'll be stretches. Maybe he'll be good 2 periods, and then in the third, he'll let up some soft goals. So it's just been kind of inconsistent out of him. And I really do think the best thing for them is Driedger coming back strong.
Yeah, and I think that the weakness that has sort of been ironed out or found out about Grubauer is that high glove. He's second to last in the league in giving up goals high glove. And most of the ones that Andy's referring to that you're looking at, and you're just kind of like, what just happened there? And it's the high glove thing. So, fixable, but you got to figure out a way to double down on it.
Their defense as well, it can't be all fully goaltending, and maybe it's the confidence thing. And if Driedger gives out that confidence vibe, that's going to help the team a lot. So hopefully they can play him more. On the defense of the back end, we all thought, again, they had good depth, and Vince has done well offensively, and we all kind of knew that was going to happen. Alexiak, a guy who really stands out for me. There's two guys, and that's number one. I didn't see this happening, but he's looked pretty steady on the back end, and that's Carson Soucy. Nick, why is his game look so steady and kind of out of nowhere, at least for a guy who catches a game every here and there?
Well, for me, I think what a lot of people need to understand about expansion franchises is that there's a growth that has to happen. There's a development that must be there. Mm-hmm. Take Vegas out of the equation. I was there for the beginning of that. It was a different situation, a different circumstance. The tragic events that happened at the beginning of October galvanized that team in that city together in a way like I've never ever seen in the 27 years I've been a sportscaster. So a moment like that bonds you in a different way. I've been a part of tragedies before, and there's something about it that it just has a way of just forging that bond. And you know, I talked to Nate Schmidt about it, and Nate Schmidt sort of said, I know this is a roundabout answer about Soucy, but you know, Nate Schmidt kind of said, like, we all kind of looked at each other in that locker room and we're like, shit, we got to win. Like, we have to win. Like, we don't have a choice. There's no matter. We have to win games for the city right now. Yeah. So there's a growth that has to happen, and that's still developing with the Seattle Kraken. I think Soucy is one of those guys who's taken the opportunity and has this new lease on life in terms of his playing career, and he's applying that, and he's fitting in, and he's the guy that has most benefited from this system that Coach Hackstall has put into place. So you're seeing the fruits of that starting to grow a little bit. And that's what you need. You need a couple of guys to start to get it and to start to mold in, and then everybody else, you know, follows along. And then all of a sudden the whole tree is in bloom.
In my following up on that, Nick, you're right. It seems to, especially in hockey, anything like tragedy or bring team together really galvanizes the guys together. We've seen that year and year apart. I remember even Martin St. Louis with what he did, what happened with him and his mom passing away, and the Rangers galvanizing with him, and the Rangers were like in the finals. It was phenomenal how that team came together for Martin. Why does it seem to happen more often than not, especially with hockey players and a hockey team, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't there in Vegas, but I think a hockey team becomes like family. I mean, those guys are around each other all the time, and they support each other. And you know, Seattle hasn't had a tragedy, thankfully. You don't ever want a tragedy, but I think just the fact that they're all in this expansion thing together is galvanizing them a little bit. And you know, Jordan Eberle talked about I don't know, 3 weeks ago now, when they were in Florida, and Drieger played against the Panthers, his former team, and had a great game, and they beat him 3-1. It was the first home ice loss the Panthers had. And he talked about how every night they have a similar story of a guy going up against his former team, and that kind of thing he thought could really build team morale. And what Nick was saying about Soucy is one of many players who are given an opportunity here in Seattle that they may not have had in their former team. You know, he was not a top 4 defenseman with Boston, and now he is, and he's given that chance. And Jared McCann's another guy up front who is taking advantage of his opportunity to play more minutes. So you see a bunch of those guys in Seattle that when you looked at him in the past, you thought, well, that guy had never really stood out, but that's because maybe he was behind guys. He was, you know, not playing top minutes, and now they are. I think that's one of the biggest things for Soucy too, is he's given the opportunity, and like Nick said, he's taking advantage of it.
Hockey is a big family. It's the biggest family I've ever been a part of. You know, I've said it multiple times, and I'll spend a lifetime paying this game back for everything it's done to me. The guys that I played my minor and junior hockey with are still some of my best friends to this day. I mean, my one best friend who I met through hockey, who formerly played for the Carolina Hurricanes, is Justin Williams. We've been friends since we were 15 years old, and you know, his kids call me Uncle Nick. And it's just, hockey is a brotherhood, it's a bond, it's a family, it's a thing, you know. And I've coached hockey, and when I coach these kids, it's the first thing I tell them. It's like, hey, you're a family. Like, you're a family, you're my family. Like, I look out for you, I'll look out for you for the rest of your life. And there's kids that I coached, you know, 15 years ago when they were 12 years old who are now having families of their own, and I get wedding invites, or I get, hey, I'm having a baby, you know, would you be Uncle Nick to the baby? You know, so it's, you do this the right way in this sport, and it's a sport that'll stay with you for the rest of your life. And guys all know that, and they know that code. and they stick by that code.
Yeah, Nick, you're a beauty. Just straight up. The one thing I noticed with Vegas, and just continuing on the theme, is when that first year, they were considered the misfits, right? They had that thing. They were the team that everybody kind of threw away, and then they galvanized that way, and they build upon that way as well. Is there a nickname? Like we've seen the nicknames for Geeky and for Rusty and for the rest of the team. Is there a kind of nickname that for the team itself?
Not that's developed, but I think it's a very similar situation. And you brought up an interesting point that people, I think, forget. The comparisons are hard to avoid, right? Because they are the last two expansion teams, and they were under the same expansion rules. But there really is not much of a comparison. And I think people look at what Vegas is like right now, but that's not the team they were during that expansion year. And if you look at, they made some trades, they brought in a lot of high end guys that were not there year one. But if you look at that year one team, if you look at the summer leading up to that, there were articles written about how that was a 15-win team. I remember reading that, like, oh, this team's going to be terrible. Boy, they really screwed up, fouled up this expansion draft. They didn't get anybody. And that's the same thing we heard now about Seattle. Seattle obviously, struggled out of the gates a little bit more. But I really think the Vegas comparison is not a really good one, because I think that, like Nick said, that team just struck lightning. It was a one in a lifetime kind of deal. And, that doesn't mean that Seattle in 3 years won't be what Vegas is now. But I try not to compare those two very much. I think people forget what Vegas was really like that year.
Yeah, and the way that the draft was not manipulated, but the way that George McPhee did things, caught everybody off guard. Those trades weren't on the table or available for Ron Francis or Ricky Olczyk. It was not possible. I don't think it's, and I've said this a lot because I get asked the question a ton because I was there for the first 2 years and now I'm here. And, I don't know as though there's another sportscaster who's ushered in 2 expansion teams, which I don't know if they're good or not, but it's not at all the same, and there shouldn't be a comparison. I mean, I know it's natural to try and do that, but it's just not. It is not fair, and it's not possible, and they are 2 very different animals.
Yeah. Well, plus the general managers just had 2-3 years to prepare for this one, where they didn't have that long against Vegas, and they also now have the hindsight of seeing what happened in Vegas and how Vegas took advantage of a lot of teams. And I think this time they were willing to say, we're willing to lose that guy. Take him. Yeah. we're not giving you anything extra to not have him go. So the lesson learned. It's funny because we thought the flat cap would have an advantage on Seattle. Mm-hmm. At least I did. I thought, well, there's some teams that are in a little bit of a salary crunch, and a couple things that we saw happen the day before this were due. There was a massive number of trades where teams were setting themselves up to not lose a guy. They got something for him back. Yeah. And then like I said before, they were just willing to lose a guy. They were like, fine, we take him. We don't care. We're not giving you anything extra for him.
And it was 50-50, right? Tarasenko playing pretty well this year. He was available. Carey Price, Montreal put him. He was available. And of course, I hope Carey Price gets a lot better. With what he's going through.
And on that subject, like, it's easy to say, well, they should have taken Tarasenko because they're not scoring goals, but Vince Dunn's been a very good player for them. Yep. And if you get Tarasenko in a salary cap, who else do you give up? There's an opportunity cost there. Do you have Jaden Schwartz on this team who you sign as a free agent, or Wenberg? Those guys may not be here because Ron Francis wanted cap flexibility, which he has. He has $7-8 million under the cap right now, and he's got about 8, 9, 10 guys who are on the last year of their contract or are going to be either RFAs or UFAs. So this team could look vastly different next year. And if you have Tarasenko, that maybe you don't have that flexibility after the season.
Right.
Exactly.
On the back end, I caught a few games, and his numbers don't show great statistically. Only 4 points, minus 11. But whenever I've caught a couple of games, Jeremy Lauzon really stands out. Not to brag, but when I watched the Ducks years ago, I was like, that guy is good. I could tell the way he skates, he's good. And that was Shea Theodore. I wanted to buy a Theodore jersey as soon as he went to the Golden Knights. I was the same way with William Nylander when he played on the Marlies. I was like, I could tell the way he skates. He looked confident. He knows what he's doing. He will get better. I kind of see the same thing out of Lauzon as well. Am I right or wrong based on the numbers?
I don't know if he's got the offensive abilities of a Shea Theodore, who we saw a lot of here in Seattle. He played junior here in Seattle, but Lazan is young. He's still prone to some mistakes, and I know he's a whipping boy in a lot of message boards, but I like him. I think Hackstall trusts him. He for large parts of the season is the quote unquote shutdown pairing. He plays against a lot of top lines, and so his analytics may not look as great because of that. But I think he's got a lot of upside. And I think they see that potential as far as being a defenseman. Maybe he's never going to score a lot of goals, I don't think, but I think he'll turn into a solid defenseman for them.
Yeah, and he's a guy who's kind of start to figure out the system a little bit better. I think he's got some work to do on just focusing on being that strong defenseman for them right now. I don't know as though they expect him to be putting up goals on the boards, more so as creating rush opportunities. Being solid in his own end will create offense without having to actually put up points. If he can make smart decisions with the puck, get them out of their zone, or make a nice play through transition and neutral ice. That's what they're looking for.
Plus, he's been a real big physical presence for them. Maybe even one of the bigger ones on the team.
Yep. Keep grinding on the boards. Keep being that big, strong guy. Shut down things in front of the net in those high danger areas, and be that guy for this team.
I don't want to keep you guys too long, so we'll just touch base quickly on the last two things. Their offense, people didn't think was going to be that great, but they seem to have a lot of depth on it. Clutch Eberle, we all expected him in Canada. We call him Captain Kid Clutch because he was phenomenal in juniors. He's playing well. Yanni Gord's back. He's playing pretty well. But Rusty, Brandon Tanev, he's really stepping up, and outside of the meme and the ghost photo and everything, he scored 3 game winners. He's been that X factor on the ice. And why is he that guy? Nick, why is it seem like things are always kind of happening around Tanev and everything seems pretty good when he throw him on the ice?
Same sort of situation with Susie. New opportunity, falls into the right spots, is given ice time, is playing up on a third line, sometimes on the second. He's got sneaky good speed, and his hands are good. And it's funny, he could have a couple more goals. He's had some breakaways where the puck's just sort of kind of hopped off of his stick a little bit, but he brings a ton of energy. He's got real good foot speed, moves well for a bigger guy. I just think, again, finds himself in a really good spot. He's got line mates that he likes, that he clicks with, and that's sometimes all these guys need. It's little things sometimes for hockey players, and a change of scenery and a different coach and a different city and a new lease on your career does wonders for you sometimes.
Yeah, energy and tenacity. That's all when you think of Brandon Tanev. And, we'll have to wait. He's injured now. He got hurt the last game. We don't yet know how bad that is. We're waiting on word on that and update on that. So that'll be a blow if he's out, because he does provide them with just a ton of energy whenever he's on the ice, whatever role he's in. He's always hustling and moving and becomes a fan favorite. Those guys always become the fan favorites. It seems like that's what he's become here.
And then last, before we go, there's still some great prospects you guys have on the Kraken that could be coming in the next few years. Riker Evans, Matty Beniers, anybody of you two guys want to touch base on which one has exceptional potential and could really change this team around?
Well, obviously Beniers is the first round pick, second overall, and we'll get a good look at him again here in the World Juniors. And then he's on that Michigan team that's lights out. I kind of expect that he'll sign after Michigan season, so we could see him the last, a couple of weeks of the season. But I really do like Riker Evans. It was funny when Riker Evans was selected high in the second round, there was a lot of draft experts who were kind of, thumb their nose at that. Like, oh, that was a reach, but he looked really good in training camp and in the preseason game he played. He's off to a great start with the Regina Pats in the WHL right now. That may end up being a pretty good pick. And plus he was an older player, so he could be further along than some of the other prospects because this is his overage year in junior. So I really like him. I think, they really found a gem there.
Again, you can find him on Twitter at Nick Gismondi for Nick, and for Andy at Andy Eide. Next week, we'll be team ISOing the LA Kings with Dennis Bernstein and Daryl Evans. Is this team for real? Is Jonathan Quick back in 2013? We'll find out more next week. I want to quickly thank our guests. Nick is always a blast when he's on. He's been huge for myself and others in the hockey community. Same for Mitchell and Jennifer for coming on again, talking Jets and coaching. Also to Andy for finally getting him on the show. He and the rest of us have had a lot of fun talking hockey. Before we go, it brings me a lot of joy to do this podcast, talking hockey with all my great guests that I have. And I just want to take a time here to say just a few words. I'm dealing with neuropathy, your host here, and some health issues. It's really hard for me right now, but doing this podcast and keeping this going keeps me going. It's a long story. If you could do just one thing for me, it's support me if you can. Please share and subscribe the show, the podcast, on social media for sharing. You can tag Jablam Sports and myself at P. Boudreau. We'll also have our own merchandise store on the website up and running, hopefully by March. Please pick up something then if you can. I'll probably reference it again later on. We'll have Jablam Sports hockey cards, as I mentioned talking to Nick. For our guests, fans can buy the cards, an image of themselves. They can give us info and we can throw that on there. Jerseys, hats, and everything will be available. I just want to thank everybody for listening to the show. And please share and subscribe this episode. And tag Jablam Sports, tag myself, P. Boudreau. I might need to take a bit of a break. But if people keep showing me the love, as my guests have been and as some fans have been, it's what keeps me going. Remember, everyone, stay healthy. And I thank you all for tuning in. If you've enjoyed anything you've heard in this episode or don't, please tweet at me or even our guests. You can follow me on Twitter at @PBoudreau or the entire team at Jablam Sports. You can use the hashtag Jablam Sports. That's JABLAM Sports. If you want to also contact us on our website, go to jablamsports.com/contact. Also, you can find all our info for all our guests and our podcasts, for even game notes for each episode, including this one. You'll get guests info and links to all the things we mentioned on this show. We even have weekly content articles. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify. And of course, click on the 3 dots in your podcasting app and share this episode with 3 friends you know. Please and thank you. Jablam Sports Hockey is your one-stop weekly shop for every expert analysis on every single team. We are a fun community bringing everyone together. Follow us on Facebook. Thank you, everyone. And to every one of our listeners, we're giving you a virtual hug. Stay healthy, listen, be yourself, and stay strong.